The door to cabin 417 swung open with a creak that echoed like a bad omen. And there he was, shirtless, sweat glistened from the humid air, his broad shoulders flexing as he tossed a duffel bag onto the lower bunk. Malcolm froze in the threshold, his own suitcase slipping from numb fingers to thud against the salt-stiff carpet, the world narrowing to the stranger's piercing blue eyes locking onto his like a lifeline in a storm. In that split second, as the man's lips parted in surprise, Malcolm realized this cruise, meant to wash away the wreckage of his last heartbreak, was about to drag him under all over again. Malcolm Hayes had always believed in signs, those fleeting whispers from the universe that nudged you toward better paths or warned you off the cliffs. But as he stood there in the narrow confines of the Pacific Star's middeck cabin, staring at the intruder who had clearly claimed half of what was supposed to be his solitary sanctuary, he wondered if this was karma's cruel punchline. Seattle's relentless rain had followed him onto the plane, a gray shroud over his breakup with Jordan 3 weeks prior. 3 years of quiet compromises crumbling into accusations of emotional unavailability, hurled like debris in a tempest. Jordan had wanted more passion, more plans, more proof that Malcolm's architect sketches and late-night model building weren't just escapes from intimacy. So Malcolm booked this 10-day Alaskan cruise on impulse, a whim born from a glossy brochure in his firm's lobby, promising fjords and glaciers as balm for a soul scraped raw. Solitude on the open sea, he told himself. Time to rebuild blueprints for a life that fit. The ship had docked that morning in Seattle's bustling harbor, the air thick with diesel and the cries of gulls wheeling over ferries. Malcolm navigated the embarkation chaos with the detached efficiency of a man who'd spent his 30s designing high-rises that pierced rainy skies. Check-in lines snaking like veins through the terminal, families lugging coolers, retirees in floral shirts clutching my Thai vouchers. He was 32, lean from sporadic gym visits and takeout-fueled deadlines, his hazel eyes carrying the faint weariness of someone who'd sketched too many unbuilt dreams. Dressed in that navy shirt and chinos, he blended into the crowd, unremarkable except for the way his fingers drummed against his thigh, a tick betraying the storm beneath his calm facade. By the time he reached the elevator to Deck 4, the initial buzz of departure horns and laughter from the pool deck above had faded into a hum. His keycard beeped green at the door, and he pushed inside expecting the crisp linen solitude of his brochure fantasy. A porthole framing the receding skyline, a single queen bed for sprawling out with a notebook and the ghosts of what-ifs. Instead, the cabin smelled of fresh cologne and sea spray. The lower bunk rumpled, a worn leather wallet splayed open on the nightstand beside a half-unpacked toiletry kit. The man straightened up slowly, all 6 feet of him unfolding like a question mark resolving into presence. He was older, maybe mid-30s, with sun-kissed olive skin stretched over a frame built from hard labor, corded forearms dusted with dark hair, a faded tattoo of an anchor peeking from his waistband. His black hair was cropped close, damp from a recent shower, and those blue eyes, storm-tossed, like the Puget Sound on a blustery day, held no apology, only a flicker of amusement that bordered on defiance. He snatched a white tank top from his bag and tugged it on, the fabric clinging to his chest in a way that made Malcolm's throat tighten inexplicably. "You the ghost from accounting?" the man said, his voice a low rumble laced with a faint southern drawl, the kind that evoked dusty Texas roads rather than Seattle's tech polish. He extended a hand, calluses rough against Malcolm's smoother palm. "Ethan Caldwell. Looks like they screwed us both." Malcolm blinked, pulling his hand back as if scorched. "Screwed? This is my cabin. Solo booking, confirmed yesterday." He fumbled for his phone, the screen lighting up his face in the dim cabin light, emails scrolling past in a blur of confirmations. But there it was, buried in the fine print. A regretful note from the cruise line about overbooking due to a system glitch, offering upgrades or shared accommodations. His stomach plummeted like the elevator he'd just ridden. Ethan leaned against the bunk frame, crossing his arms in a posture that screamed unmovable. "Same here, buddy. Booked this for my sabbatical. First real break in years from swinging hammers in Austin. They called me at the dock, said the suite's mine if I don't mind company. Figured, hell, why not? Beats sleeping on the lounge chairs." His grin was lopsided, revealing a dimple that softened the edges of his stubble-shadowed jaw. But his eyes scanned Malcolm with the wary assessment of someone who'd shared too many motels with strangers on job sites. Malcolm's mind raced, blueprints of escape forming and dissolving. Demand a refund? Storm the purser's desk amid the welcome aboard champagne toasts? Or swallow the absurdity and make do, because turning back now meant admitting defeat to the empty apartment waiting in Capitol Hill. He glanced at the upper bunk, a narrow shelf accessed by a ladder that looked like it could buckle under his weight, and imagined nights of awkward silences punctuated by the other's snores. "This is insane," he muttered, rubbing his temple where a headache bloomed. "I'm Malcolm, by the way, and I'm not. I booked this to be alone." Ethan's expression shifted, the amusement fading into something quieter, more empathetic. "Alone's overrated sometimes, Malcolm, especially when the sea's calling your name." He nodded toward the porthole, where the Olympic mountains were already shrinking into silhouettes against the fading sun. "Look, I'll take the top if it helps. And if you snore, I'll just plug my ears with these." He jangled a pair of earplugs from his bag, the gesture light but his gaze steady, as if he saw the fracture lines in Malcolm's composure. They unpacked in terse silence, the cabin's confines amplifying every rustle of fabric and zipper. Malcolm claimed the lower bunk by default, stowing his sketchpad under the pillow, its pages filled with half-formed designs for a sustainable community center in Tacoma. His latest pitch, a bid for meaning beyond Jordan's echoes. Ethan arranged his side with the economy of a man used to transient spaces. A stack of paperbacks on carpentry techniques, a flask that smelled faintly of bourbon when he uncapped it for a swig, and a photo tucked into the mirror's edge. A younger Ethan with a group of roughneck friends, arms slung around shoulders under a vast Montana sky. As the ship lurched gently from the dock, a vibration humming through the hull like a distant heartbeat, Malcolm perched on the edge of his bed, staring at the carpet's worn pattern. The hook of it all, the double booking, this stranger's easy intrusion, felt like the universe mocking his quest for a reset. But Ethan's presence, solid and unapologetic, stirred something unfamiliar. Not quite comfort, but a curiosity that prickled like the first raindrops on parched earth. Dinner that evening in the main dining room was a forced march into normalcy. The Pacific Star's Atlantis deck glittered under chandeliers that mimicked starry nights. Tables draped in white linen where passengers dissected escargot and swapped stories of ports past. Malcolm and Ethan were seated with a chatty couple from Chicago, Ed and Lorraine, both in their 60s, celebrating an anniversary with tales of windswept Lake Michigan winters, and a solo traveler named Riley, a 20-something influencer snapping photos of her salmon for Instagram. Malcolm poked at his Caesar salad, the romaine crisp but flavorless against the knot in his chest. Ethan, across from him, dove into his steak with gusto, regaling the table with a yarn about a roofing job gone wrong in the hill country, where a hailstorm turned the site into a war zone. His laugh boomed, drawing glances from nearby diners, and for a moment, Malcolm envied that effortless charisma, the way Ethan wore his stories like a well-fitted jacket. "So, Malcolm," Lorraine leaned in, her pearls swinging like pendulums, "what brings a handsome architect like you to these waters? Escaping the city's grind." The question landed like a plumb line, straight to the fault. Malcolm's fork paused midair. "Something like that," he said, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Needed a change of scenery. Seattle's beautiful, but it can feel confining." Ethan's foot brushed his under the table. Accidental, surely, but the contact lingered a beat too long, sending a jolt up Malcolm's calf. He glanced up to find Ethan watching him, that blue gaze unreadable over the rim of his wineglass. "Confining's no way to live," Ethan said softly, almost to himself. "Out here, the world's wide open. Room to breathe, to build something real." The words hung, laced with subtext Malcolm couldn't quite parse. Was it advice or an invitation? Riley chimed in with her vlog plans for Juneau's glaciers, diffusing the moment. But as the meal wound down with slices of key lime pie, Malcolm felt the ship's sway syncing with his pulse, a rhythm that whispered of possibilities he hadn't charted. Back in the cabin, the air had thickened with the night's humidity, the porthole fogged from their breaths. Ethan stripped down to boxers without ceremony, his body a map of earned scars. A puckered line across his ribs from a fallen beam, freckles scattering like constellations over his shoulders. Malcolm averted his eyes, climbing the ladder to the upper bunk with the grace of a man evading landmines, the mattress dipping under his weight like a reluctant confession. "Lights out," Ethan called from below, his voice muffled by the thin partition. "Yeah," Malcolm replied, staring at the ceiling panels where shadows danced from passing deck lights. Sleep came in fits, the engine's thrum underscoring dreams of crumbling structures and hands reaching through fog, Jordan's, then Ethan's, blurring into one. Morning broke with a knock that rattled the door like thunder. Malcolm jolted awake, heart hammering, only to hear Ethan's groggy, "What the hell?" from below. It was housekeeping, a cheerful Filipino woman named Maria with a cart laden in linens, chirping apologies for the early hour. 7 a.m., and the ship was slicing through the Strait of Juan de Fuca, mist cloaking the water like a lover's veil. They dressed in the awkward ballet of shared space. Malcolm in swim trunks and a faded UW hoodie, Ethan in board shorts that hugged his thighs and a tank that strained across his chest. Breakfast on the Lido deck was a buffet sprawl. Stacks of pancakes drowning in syrup, omelets folded around bacon, the air alive with chatter and the sizzle of griddles. They claimed a table by the rail, the wind whipping salt into their coffee, and for the first time, conversation flowed without the crutch of strangers. "You're really from Austin?" Malcolm asked, stirring his mug, the steam curling like questions unspoken. "Born and raised," Ethan said, tearing into a muffin with strong teeth. "Dad was a rancher turned contractor after the oil bust. Taught me everything about framing a house before I could drive." "What about you?" "Seattle boy through and through." Malcolm nodded, tracing the rim of his cup. "Grew up in Bellevue, suburbs with views of the Cascades. Dad's an engineer, retired now, tinkers with model trains in the garage. Mom's the artist, paints watercolors of the sound that sell in Pike Place galleries." He paused, the familiarity of family lore feeling exposed under Ethan's gaze. Architecture was the compromise. Structure with a soul, you know? Ethan's eyes crinkled at the corners. "Soul's the hard part. I've built 100 houses, but none ever felt like home." He leaned back, the chair creaking under him, and for a heartbeat vulnerability cracked his facade. A glimpse of the man behind the hammer swings. The day unfolded like a storyboard from a feel-good indie flick. A naturalist lecture on humpback migrations in the theater, where Ethan's knee pressed against Malcolm's in the dim rose, accidental warmth that lingered. A shuffleboard tournament on the sports deck, where Malcolm's precise shots earned cheers and Ethan's wild swings drew laughs, their banter sharpening into something flirtatious, edged with challenge. By afternoon, they were knee-deep in the thermal pool, jets pounding their backs as the ship carved toward Victoria's lights. "You ever think about why we run to the water?" Ethan asked, water beating on his lashes like tears held back. Malcolm sank lower, the heat loosening knots he didn't know were there. To drown the noise, maybe, or find echoes of ourselves in the waves. Ethan's hand found his under the bubbles, fingers intertwining with a question in the touch. Malcolm didn't pull away. The kiss happened on the third night, under a canopy of stars that the ship's lights couldn't quite dim. They'd wandered to the aft deck after a lackluster magic show, Malcolm nursing a gin and tonic that burned less than the memory of Jordan's parting words, Ethan with a beer bottle dangling from scarred fingers. The wake churned white behind them, a frothy scar on the black Pacific, and the air hummed with the low croon of Norah Jones from hidden speakers. It started with a shared cigarette, pilfered from a lounge ashtray. Malcolm didn't smoke, hadn't since college parties in the U District, but the offer from Ethan's lips felt like a dare he couldn't refuse. They leaned on the rail, shoulders brushing, the ember glowing like a secret between them. To bad bookings and better company, Ethan toasted, exhaling smoke that curled toward Orion. Malcolm laughed, a sound rusty from disuse, and turned to say something witty about fate's lousy travel agent. But the words died as Ethan's face filled his vision. close enough to count the flecks of gray in his stubble, the faint scar above his lip from a bar fight in his 20s. Blue eyes searched his, hungry and hesitant, and then Ethan's mouth was on his, firm and tasting of hops and salt. The world tilted, the ship's roll amplifying the spin in Malcolm's chest. He kissed back, hands fisting in Ethan's tank top, the fabric damp from evening dew. It was messy, urgent, teeth clashing, breaths mingling in gasps that fogged the chill air. Ethan's palm cupped his jaw, thumb tracing the pulse hammering at Malcolm's throat, grounding him even as desire threatened to unmoor everything. They broke apart when a deckhand's flashlight swept past, laughter bubbling up in its wake. Nervous, exhilarated. "Well?" Malcolm panted, forehead resting against Ethan's. "That's one way to claim the lower bunk." Ethan's chuckle rumbled deep, vibrating through them both. "Told you, room to build something real." Back in the cabin, the air crackled with unspoken intent. They moved like dancers in a confined stage, shedding clothes with deliberate slowness. Malcolm's shirt unbuttoned to reveal the lean planes of his chest, pale in the porthole's moonlight. Ethan's shorts pooling at his ankles, his body a testament to sun and sweat. The lower bunk became their world, sheets tangling as hands explored, mapping scars and sighs. Ethan's touch was reverent, callous as a contrast to silk-soft kisses trailed down Malcolm's spine, while Malcolm's fingers delved into dark hair, pulling him closer, chasing the heat that banished ghosts. Afterward, they lay spent, limbs entwined, the ship's hum a lullaby. Ethan's breath feathered Malcolm's neck, steady and warm. "Haven't done this in, God, years," he murmured, voice thick with vulnerability. "Last guy was a mistake. Cowboy type, all flash, no foundation." Malcolm traced the anchor tattoo on Ethan's hip. The ink faded but the lines sure. Jordan was the same. Thought stability meant settling. Turns out, it just meant stagnation. He propped on an elbow, studying Ethan's profile, the way his lashes cast shadows like unspoken fears. "This us feels different, like sketching a skyline that actually stands." Ethan turned, cupping Malcolm's face, his kiss softer now, a seal on the night's confessions. Sleep claimed them tangled, the upper bunk forgotten. Dawn painted the cabin in peach hues, filtering through curtains drawn against prying eyes. Malcolm woke first, Ethan's arm heavy across his waist, the man's snores a gentle rumble. He slipped free, padding to the porthole where Victoria's Parliament buildings glowed across the strait, their spires an echo of his own designs, elegant, enduring. Coffee from the room's pod machine steamed in mugs as Ethan stirred, stretching with a yawn that revealed the dimple Malcolm was already memorizing. They spent the port day wandering Butchert Gardens, the air perfumed with roses and damp earth, a far cry from urban concrete. Ethan's hand found Malcolm's in the sunken garden, fingers lacing amid hydrangeas blooming defiant pinks. "Ever built something green like this?" Ethan asked, nodding at the Victorian greenhouse, its glass panes fogged with tropical breath. "Not yet," Malcolm admitted, squeezing back. "But I've got ideas. Vertical farms in old warehouses, community hubs with rooftop apiaries. Places where people connect, not just coexist." Ethan's eyes lit, mirroring the sunlight on lily ponds. "Sounds like home. The kind I never had. Too many moves, too many half-finished jobs." He paused at a bench overlooking a cascade, pulling Malcolm down beside him. "My folks, they don't know about this side of me. Dad's all bluster and beer. Mom's the quiet type, baking pies for church suppers. Coming out would have cracked the foundation." The confession hung, heavy as the mist rising from falls. Malcolm's thumb stroked Ethan's knuckles, a silent anchor. "Mine knew early, paraded me to pride in Capitol Hill when I was 16. But Jordan, he made me question if love was worth the blueprint changes." They kissed there, amid tourists snapping selfies, the world blurring to the press of lips and the rustle of leaves. It was a promise, fragile but fierce. Back on board as the ship weighed anchor for Ketchikan, the mood shifted to buoyant. Dinner with Ed and Lorraine, who winked knowingly at their flushed cheeks. A salsa lesson in the disco where Ethan's hips moved with surprising grace, pulling Malcolm into spins that left them breathless and laughing. That night, in the cabin's glow, they made love again, slower, savoring. The slide of skin, the arch of backs, whispers of names like incantations. By day 5, en route to Juneau, the flirtation had deepened into intimacy's quiet rituals. Ethan braiding wildflowers into Malcolm's hair from a tide pool excursion. Malcolm sketching Ethan's profile on a napkin during whale watching, the pencil capturing the curve of his smile as Orcus breached. "You're good," Ethan said, peering over his shoulder, breath warm on Malcolm's ear. "See me like no one's ever bothered to." But beneath the idle, Fishers hinted. Ethan's phone buzzed more frequently, texts he silenced with a flick, his jaw tightening when Malcolm asked. "Just work stuff," he'd say, deflecting with a kiss. Malcolm let it slide, unwilling to shatter the bubble, but doubt seeded, like cracks in fresh concrete. The crisis brewed in Tracy Arm Fjord, where the ship idled amid icebergs calving thunderous into emerald waters. They'd claimed a quiet spot on the observation deck, binoculars pressed to eyes, when Ethan's phone lit up insistent. He stepped away, voice low and edged. "Not now, Garrett. I told you this trip's mine." Malcolm's stomach nodded, the name a splinter. "Garrett who?" When Ethan returned, face stormy, Malcolm pressed gently. "Everything okay?" "Fine," Ethan clipped, too quick. "Old crewmate." "Nothing." But the lie lingered, souring the glacier's majesty. That evening, over lobster in the captain's club, Ethan was distant, eyes drifting to the window where seals barked on buoys. Malcolm's attempts at levity, jokes about Mendenhall's melt, fell flat, the table a minefield of unspoken minds. In the cabin, tension snapped. "Who the hell is Garrett?" Malcolm demanded, pacing the narrow floor as Ethan stripped for bed. Ethan froze, back turned, muscles coiling. "Doesn't matter. Drop it. It matters when you're whispering like it's a secret you're ashamed of." Malcolm's voice cracked, Jordan's accusations echoing. Emotional unavailability, now flipped on him. Ethan whirled, eyes blazing. "Ashamed? You think that's it? Garrett's my ex. Pushed me into a corner I clawed out of. This trip was supposed to be clean, Malcolm. No baggage. And what am I? Baggage relief." The words escaped barbed, born of fear. Ethan's face crumpled, then hardened. "Maybe. Or maybe you're just another sketch you erase when it gets real." The slap of silence stung worse than any shout. Ethan climbed to the upper bunk without another word, the ladder creaking like breaking bones. Malcolm lay awake, tears hot on his pillow, the ship's sway mocking his unraveling. Dawn in Juneau brought no thaw, the Alaskan sun mocking their frost with relentless gold. Malcolm rose early, slipping out for a solo hike to the Mendenhall Glacier, boots crunching over moraine as if each step could grind away the night's shards. The ice wall loomed, blue-veined and groaning, a mirror to his chest, beautiful, but fracturing under pressure. He sketched it furiously, lines jagged, until his hands shook too much to hold the pencil. Ethan's absence at breakfast felt like a void, the Lido deck's chatter hollow without his booming laugh. Riley waved him over, her plate piled with fruit salad, but Malcolm demurred, grabbing a coffee to go and retreating to the library's quiet stacks. There, amid nautical charts and dog-eared paperbacks, he nursed the ache, replaying Ethan's words. Another sketch you erase. Was that what he did? Design lives that looked perfect on paper but crumbled in construction? By noon, the ship docked and Malcolm wandered Juneau's frontier streets alone. Salmon smokehouses wafting cedar, totem poles carved with raven eyes that seemed to judge. He bought a jade pendant on a leather cord, its green cool against his palm, a talisman for mending what he'd broken. But as he traced the Gold Rush Trail to the Red Dog Saloon, the town's oldest dive with sawdust floors and piano tinkles, doubt clawed deeper. Jordan had called him distant, a builder of walls not bridges. Now Ethan echoed it, and the truth settled like silt. Malcolm fled into solitude because connection terrified him, the risk of collapse too great. He texted Ethan, Need air. Back by sail away. No reply, but the read receipt burned. Ethan, meanwhile, had vanished into the ship's underbelly, pounding out frustration on the Jim's heavy bag until his knuckles split. Sweat stung the cuts, a penance for his outburst. Garrett's texts had been innocuous, a buddy check-in twisted by old insecurities. But Malcolm's barb had struck bone. Baggage relief. Wasn't that exactly what he'd feared becoming on this trip? A man adrift, latching onto the first steady gaze, only to sabotage it with shadows from Austin nights where Garrett's jealousy turned possessive, fists replacing words. He showered scalding, the water sluicing regret, then sought out the purser's desk. "Any way to switch cabins?" he asked the harried clerk, voice low. The answer was no. Overbook resolved, waitlists long. But the inquiry felt like surrender, a crack in the foundation he'd started laying with Malcolm. They reconvened in the cabin as horns blared departure, the air thick with unspoken glaciers between them. Malcolm entered first, pendant clutched in his fist, Ethan already there, perched on the lower bunk with a peace offering. 2 IPAs from the minibar, condensation beating like unshed tears. "Truce." Ethan extended one, his eyes red-rimmed. The southern drawl softened to plea. Malcolm hesitated, then took it, the bottle cold against his heat. "I'm sorry. That came out wrong. You're not baggage, you're unexpected. The best kind." Ethan's shoulders sagged, relief flooding his features. "Me too." Garrett's ancient history, guy who thought love meant chains, pushed me back in the closet till I broke free. Seeing his name just triggered the wiring. They clinked bottles, the fizz a small detonation of ice melt. Conversation trickled, then flowed. Ethan's tales of Austin's live oak groves, where he'd carve initials into bark as a kid dreaming of escape. Malcolm's confessions of Bellevue summers, biking to Lake Washington with sketchbooks, drawing futures that never included staying put. Vulnerability bridged them, hands brushing knees, then clasping. That night, as the ship ghosted towards Skagway, they rebuilt in whispers and touches. Kisses that started tentative, apologies pressed into collarbones, until passion crested again, fiercer for the fracture. Ethan's body over his, grounding as if to say, "This stands, we stand." Skagway dawned crisp, the gold rush town's wooden boardwalks evoking frontier grit under mountain shadows. They explored hand in hand, a tacit declaration. Klondike saloons with mounted moose heads, the White Pass trails echoes of stampeders. At a chocolatier, Ethan fed Malcolm a truffle dusted with sea salt, thumb lingering on his lip, the gesture intimate amid tourists haggling for panning kits. "Your trouble?" Malcolm murmured, licking chocolate from his finger, heat pooling low. Ethan's grin was wolfish. "The good kind. Come on, let's chase waterfalls." They hiked Sheep Gulch, the path steep and scented with pine, laughter echoing off cliffs as they splashed in pools fed by melt. Stripped to trunks, they wrestled in the spray, bodies slick and straining, the play tumbling into desire against mossy rocks. Quick, stolen, the roar of falls drowning their moans. It was reckless, alive, a counterpoint to the morning's mending. But the mend held fragile threads. That evening, over halibut in the piano bar, Ethan's phone buzzed again. Not Garrett, but his sister Lila, voicemail lighting the screen. He played it on speaker, the cabin a confessional. "Ethan, Dad's asking when you're settling down. Bring a girl home next Christmas? Love you, bro." The words landed like frost, Ethan's face paling. "Family tradition," he explained, voice strained. "They assume straight, I let 'em. Easier than the fallout." Malcolm's heart twisted, empathy laced with echo of his own ease. "You deserve parades, not assumptions. Like in Seattle, pride floats and rainbow crosswalks." Ethan's laugh was bitter. "Austin's got pride, but Dad's world? Is barbed wire and beer. One wrong word, and the whole ranch unravels." They made love that night with a desperation born of borrowed time. Bodies fierce, but sleep brought dreams. Malcolm of Jordan's silhouette in fog, Ethan of family photos fading to grayscale. Day 7 in Haines brought bald eagles wheeling over Chilkat Inlet. the preserve a symphony of wings and tidal breaths. They kayak doubles, paddles dipping in unison, the rhythm syncing their breaths. "Imagine this forever," Malcolm said, as an eagle snatched salmon mid-leap. "Us building, your hands my plans." Ethan's stroke faltered. "Forever's a big blueprint." The seed of doubt sprouted, but they harvested it in Haynes Craft Brewery. IPAs foaming over talks of post-cruise what-ifs. Malcolm's Tacoma project, Ethan's vague plans to freelance north. "Come to Seattle," Malcolm urged, fingers tracing Ethan's palm. "We could frame something ours." Ethan's eyes darkened, not with no, but with the weight of yes cost. Need to think. That night, the cabin held a precipice. As Malcolm drifted off, Ethan's phone whispered once more. A text from Garrett. "Missed you on the job. Call when you're back. We talk?" The betrayal brewed silent, a storm front rolling in. The unraveling hit like a rogue wave off Ketchikan's totem-line shores, where rain lashed the decks and the air smelled of smoked salmon and regret. They'd planned a zip line through the rainforest canopy, a thrill to cap the voyage's midpoint. But Ethan's mood had soured overnight, his touches fleeting, eyes averted like a man charting escape routes. Malcolm chalked it to jet lag's ghost. Time zones blurring days into a haze, but the fracture widened with each dodged glance. At breakfast, over blueberry scones crumbling like resolve, Ethan's phone skittered across the table. He snatched it, but not before Malcolm glimpsed the sender. Garrett. Again. The name clawed now, no longer abstract, a hook in flesh. "Everything all right?" Malcolm asked, voice pitched casual, but his coffee turned bitter on his tongue. "Yeah, just logistics," Ethan muttered, pocketing the device. His knee, usually a steady press under the table, stayed distant. The zip line was agony masked as adventure. Harnesses biting hips, cables humming as they soared over ferns dripping with mist. Malcolm hooped into the void, wind whipping his hair, but Ethan's silence echoed louder, his grip on the line white-knuckled. On the platform between runs, as guides clipped carabiners, Malcolm cornered him against damp bark. "Talk to me. This isn't logistics. It's us pulling apart." Ethan's jaw clenched, rain beating on his lashes like accusations. "It's nothing you did. Swear." But the lie reeked, and Malcolm's patience, stretched thin as the cables, snapped. "Garrett? If it's him, say it. Don't make me guess why you're a ghost in your own skin." Ethan recoiled as if slapped, blue eyes storming. "You going through my phone now?" "Jesus, Malcolm." The words ignited dry tinder. "No, but it's there. Buzzing like a goddamn alarm. If we're building something, it can't be on half-truths." They finished the course in brittle quiet, the descent jarring as confessions withheld. Back on ship, the cabin became a pressure cooker. Malcolm pacing, Ethan slumped on the bunk, head in hands. The dam broke when another text chimed. Ethan's flinched the final straw. "Show me," Malcolm demanded, voice raw, "or we're done before we start." Ethan's hands trembled as he unlocked the screen, thrusting it forward like a verdict. The thread unspooled. Garrett's messages, innocuous at first, job updates, beer invites, but laced with undercurrents. "Remember that night in the motel? Missed that fire. Then the gut punch, heard you're on some cruise. Solo? Come back, we fix us. Family man like you needs roots." Malcolm's vision tunneled, the words blurring through a haze of hurt. "Family man? What the hell does that mean?" Ethan deflated, the fight leaching out. "Garrett's my ex, yeah. But more, he's the one who outed me to my folks last year. Twisted a fight into confessions over whiskey. Dad hasn't spoken since. This trip, I booked it to think, to maybe go back and face it. But then you showed up as the convenient distraction?" Malcolm's voice cracked, the pendant around his neck suddenly leaden. "You knew about the double book? Used it to, what, play house till port?" "No!" Ethan's denial roared, but guilt shadowed it. "I didn't know it'd be you. But when it was, God, Malcolm, you felt like salvage. Like I could build without the wreck." The betrayal bloomed full, thorns twisting deep. Malcolm saw it now. The silences, the deflections, not just scars but strategies. Jordan's ghost paled beside this fresh wound. Intimacy forged in half-lights, crumbling under truth's weight. "I thought we were real," he whispered, grabbing his jacket. "Turns out, I'm just the temporary blueprint." He stormed out, the corridor's fluorescent buzz mocking his blur of tears. The ship, once a vessel of renewal, now a labyrinth of echoes. Lounges empty save for night owls, elevators whispering judgments. He ended up on the bow, rain sheeting the glass dome, the black sea a void mirroring his chest. Hours blurred. A bar tab of whiskeys that dulled but didn't deaden. A midnight movie in the theater where rom-com tropes twisted knives. Dawn found him curled on a deck chair, hoodie sodden, the cold seeping to bone. Crisis peaked in sobs rung silent, the realization crashing. Love's risk was ruin, better sketched than staked. Ethan searched through the night, regret a vice. He found Malcolm at first light, shivering under the solarium's palms, eyes hollow as fjord depths. "Malcolm," he pleaded, dropping to knees on wet tile, rain mingling with his own tears. "I fucked up. Not the booking, that was glitch. But hiding. Yeah. Garrett's poison, and I let it seep." Malcolm's gaze was ice. "Why not tell me? From the start." "Fear," Ethan admitted, voice breaking. "Of losing you before I had you. My life's a half-built frame. Dad's silence, jobs that end, Garrett's shadow. You're the first thing that felt solid." The honesty pierced, but hurt held fast. "Solid crumbles too. I can't be your fix-it project." "You're not." Ethan's hand hovered, then retreated. "You're the blueprint. Let me prove it." Malcolm wavered, the sea's whisper urging grace. "How?" "Full disclosure. No more shadows." Ethan pulled out his phone, dialing speaker, his father's number, the ring a gauntlet. Voicemail clicked. "Ethan? His dad. Lila says you're dodging. Call back, son. We miss you." The gruff voice, laced with ache, hung raw. Ethan's exhale shuddered. "That's the start. Come with me to Austin after? Help me rebuild for real." The offer dangled, a lifeline or lure. Malcolm searched those blue eyes, seeing not deceit, but a man cracking open, vulnerable, vast. Slowly he nodded. "Okay, but slow. No rushing foundations." Relief flooded Ethan's face, and he pulled Malcolm into an embrace fierce as the gale, rain washing them clean. The crisis crested, then ebbed, leaving space for healing's tentative lines. The healing began in fragments, like a structure rising beam by beam under careful hands. After Ketchikan's downpour, they returned to the cabin not as strangers or lovers in limbo, but architects of amends, Ethan dismantling walls with nightly calls to Lila, his sister's voice a bridge over Dad's chasm. Malcolm sharing sketchpads filled with aborted designs, vulnerabilities inked black. The ship's rhythm aided, days blending into ports that peeled back layers. Sitka's Russian onion domes prompting talks of heritage. Malcolm's Scotch-Irish roots clashing with Ethan's Tex-Mex blend. Wrangle's petroglyphs, ancient carvings mirroring scars time-smoothed but never erased. Intimacy rebuilt cautious, touches exploratory rather than claiming. Fingers tracing jaws in morning light, kisses lingering like questions answered yes. One evening in the jazz lounge, over saxophones wailing like hearts mending, Ethan confessed more. "Garrett wasn't just ex. He was the reason I left Austin 6 months back. Caught me with a coworker at a site party, went nuclear. Told my folks I was confused. But it stuck. I've been drifting since, taking gigs in Montana, Oregon. This cruise? Half escape, half prayer for direction." Malcolm listened, saxophone's blue notes underscoring the weight. "And me? Direction or detour?" Ethan's hand covered his, steady. "Compass north. You make me want roots that run deep, not shallow spreads." The words rooted something in Malcolm too, a shift from flight to foundation. He'd spent years designing for others. Eco-towers for Seattle's elite, community centers for Tacoma's underserved. Each project a proxy for the home he'd never built within. Jordan had called it avoidance. Now, with Ethan, it felt like invitation. As the ship turned south, tracing inside passages' labyrinthine channels, their routine solidified. Dawn yoga on the Serenity deck, where poses synced breaths and bent bodies toward trust. Afternoons in the art studio, Malcolm guiding Ethan's hands on clay. Bowls thrown lopsided but honest, laughter sealing cracks. Evenings brought stargazing from the cabin's balcony extension. A narrow ledge where they bundled in blankets. Ethan's head on Malcolm's lap, constellations mapping futures. But healing's path wound, not straight-lined. Nightmares ambushed. Malcolm jolting from dreams of double-booked beds emptying to voids. Ethan murmuring comforts till sleep reclaimed. Ethan waking sweat-slick from visions of Dad's ranch burning. Malcolm's arms a firewall. One storm-tossed night off Prince Rupert. Waves slamming hull like judgments. Ethan broke. What if I can't fix it? Folks, me. It's all timber waiting for spark. Malcolm pulled him close, heartbeat a metronome. Then we rebuild fireproof. Together. The turning deepened in the final Alaskan port. Glacier Bay's majesty, a sermon in ice and rebirth. They helicoptered to a tundra overlook, boots sinking in moss as grizzlies foraged berries below, indifferent to human frailties. Up there, wind howling hymns, Ethan dropped to one knee. Not proposal, but proposition. A small box from his duffel, containing a keychain carved from Sitka spruce, etched with an anchor entwined in blueprint lines. For when we dock, my truck key, yours if you want the drive south. Austin first, then wherever your sketches lead. Malcolm's throat closed, tears pricking as he accepted. The wood warm as promise. Seattle detour? Show you the firm's mock-ups. Pride night fireworks. Deal? Ethan grinned, rising to kiss him fierce. The valley sprawling witness. Back aboard, the voyage's end loomed. Vancouver's skyline beckoning like a finish line. Passengers buzzed with disembarkation plans. Flights to Chicago, trains to the Rockies. Malcolm and Ethan lingered in limbo, packing duffels with deliberate slowness, folding shirts that carried salt and sweat memories. The cabin, once cramped cage, now cradled farewells deferred. On the last night, a farewell gala glittered the grand ballroom. Passengers in semi-formal finery, Ed and Lorraine slow dancing to big band swells. Riley live-streaming her toast. Malcolm, in a slim black suit that hugged his frame, felt exposed under lights. Ethan, in chinos and a crisp Oxford rolled at cuffs, exuded quiet strength. They danced, bodies aligning in waltz steps learned haphazardly, the floor yielding to their sway. "You're my plot twist," Malcolm whispered into Ethan's ear, nuzzling the shell. Ethan's arms tightened. "And you're the ending that writes itself happy." But as confetti rained and champagne popped, a shadow intruded. Garrett's final text, deleted unread, but its echo in Ethan's stiffening. "Blocked him for good," he vowed later in the cabin's hush, phone sailing into the trash with finality. Malcolm nodded, belief budding. Healing wasn't linear, he knew. Crises would crest again, betrayal's ghosts whisper. But in Ethan's eyes, he saw scaffolding strong enough for storms. They made love one last time on the Pacific Star, slow and sacred, bodies a testament. Arches and thrusts building to crescendo, release a shared sigh into dawn. As Vancouver's lights pricked the horizon, they dressed for departure, bags zipped on possibility. The gangway lowered, reality's threshold. Hand in hand, they stepped off, not into endings but extensions. A road trip south, blueprints redrawn. Malcolm glanced back at the ship, its white hull a chapter closed, then forward to Ethan, his co-author, his compass. In that moment, amid horns and hugs, the human truth settled. Love, double-booked or destined, demanded daring. Tearing down to build anew, one vulnerable beam at a time. Disembarkation in Vancouver unfolded like an exhale after held breath. The terminal a swirl of luggage carts and tearful goodbyes. Malcolm and Ethan navigated it shoulder to shoulder. Ethan's duffel slung over one broad arm. Malcolm's portfolio case clutched like a shield. The Canadian air bit crisp, laced with conifer and coffee from harborside stands. A bridge between Alaskan wilds and the continent's sprawl. They hailed a cab to the border, the the driver, a loquacious Sikh with tales of Punjab monsoons, regaling them with immigrant grit that mirrored their own mending. "Heading stateside?" the cabbie asked, eyes flicking to their joined hands in the rearview. "Austin way," Ethan replied, thumb stroking Malcolm's knuckle. "Roundabout, but worth the miles." The border crossing was a formality, passport stamped, questions perfunctory, but it felt momentous, a line crossed not just geographic but internal. As they merged onto I-5 South, Ethan's truck waiting in long-term Seattle lot, the highway unspooled like ribbon. Evergreens blurring to farmlands, radio crooning Lucinda Williams ballads of hard-won hearts. First stop, Seattle, Malcolm's domain. They crashed at his Capitol Hill walk-up, a third-floor charmer with exposed brick and views of the Space Needle winking at dusk. Ethan marveled at the space. Drafting table strewn with vellum, bookshelves groaning under Le Corbusier togs and queer lit from Elliott Bay. "This is you," he said, tracing a half-model of the Tacoma Center, its sustainable curves gleaming under desk lamp. "Open, but with bones." Malcolm flushed, pride mingling with nerves. "Our bones now." That night, they christened the space. Kitchen counter confessions over pad thai takeout, bed a tangle of limbs and low laughs, the city lights filtering like blessings. Morning brought the firm, Hargrove Architects, a glass-fronted loft in Belltown where Malcolm's pitch loomed. Ethan tagged along, a quiet pillar in the conference room as Malcolm unveiled the community hub, solar panels angling like wings, green roofs buzzing with pollinators, spaces for art classes and AA meets. The partners nodded, impressed. Ethan's gaze burned proud, his post-pitch whisper, "Nailed it," igniting more than professional fire. Pride Night followed, a kaleidoscope of floats and feathers down 4th Avenue. They wove through the throng, drag queens on stilts, leather daddies locking arms, rainbow flags snapping in breeze. Ethan, wide-eyed amid the spectacle, clutched Malcolm's hand tighter at a marriage equality banner, his Austin ghosts paling in the roar. "This," he breathed, as fireworks bloomed over Elliott Bay. "This is what family looks like." Malcolm kissed him then, public and unapologetic, sparks mirroring the sky. "Welcome home." The drive south tested and tempered, Oregon's coastal crags prompting pit stops at Cannon Beach, where Haystack Rock loomed like a sentinel, and they hiked barefoot, waves nipping toes, sharing dreams. Ethan's vision of an eco-carpentry co-op, Malcolm's integration of reclaimed timber into urban renewals. Crises flickered. A blowout near Eugene. Rain sheeting as Ethan changed the tire, frustration flaring into shouts. "Can't even fix this right," echoing deeper fears. But they knelt in mud together, Jack cranking slow, apologies murmured with lug nuts. Montana's big skies stretched the healing, camping under Milky Way veils near Glacier Park. Tent a cocoon where Ethan finally called home. Speakerphone crackled Dad's voice, gruff but thawing. "'Bout time, son. Lila says you're with someone." The pause hung. Then, "Bring him to the ranch. See if he can handle the dust." Ethan's tears wet Malcolm's shirt, relief a flood. He said yes. Or, close. Idaho's panhandle brought whimsy. Coeur d'Alene's lakeside idyll, canoeing to dogwood groves where Ethan carved their initials, not in bark, but a pendant matching Malcolm's jade. Wyoming's winds whispered warnings. Devil's Tower's monolith a phallic reminder of standing tall amid judgments. But they summit Sand Butte at sunset, arms linked, vows exchanged in sweat and silence. Utah's Reds tested resolve. A motel in Moab, Garrett's shadow via a mutual friend's FB tag. Miss the old crew. Triggering Ethan's spiral. "What if they never accept?" he raged, pacing the room's faded carpet. Malcolm drew him to the balcony, stars pricking vast black. "Then we build our constellation. Screw the old map." The Grand Canyon's rim hushed them. Colorado River a serpentine scar below, healing's metaphor in erosion's patience. Arizona's saguaros stood sentinel as they camped Saguaro National Park, fire crackling stories. Malcolm's Bellevue boyhood bikes, Ethan's Austin rodeos where he'd hide crushes in cheers. Texas border crossed at dawn, the Panhandle's flat expanse a palette for homecoming. Austin sprawled heat-hazed, live oaks draping like old friends. The ranch lay 30 miles out, a weathered spread of corrals and clay tile roofs. Lila's truck in the drive a beacon. She enveloped Ethan in hugs scented of chili and sage, then eyed Malcolm appraising. Heard you're the one framing my brother's walls. Welcome. Dad waited on the porch, Stetson shadowing eyes. Wary, but open. Handshake firm, words gruff. Heard you build things that last. Prove it over brisket. Dinner unfolded tentative. Lila's banter easing tensions. Mom's pecan pie a sweet truce. As dusk fell, crickets chorusing, Dad pulled Ethan aside, voices low, then clapped Malcolm's shoulder. Treat him right. Caldwell men are stubborn, but worth the nails. The night sealed it. Guest room bunked together, bodies aligning in quiet certainty. The ranch's creaks a lullaby of belonging. Months blurred. Malcolm commuting for Tacoma builds. Ethan launching his co-op with reclaimed beams from the hub. Conflicts crested, distances strain, Dad's old jokes testing patience. But each weathered, stronger. Therapy sessions in Austin's queer center. Pride floats now shared under Texas stars. A year on, at the ranch's spring roundup under cottonwoods blooming white, Ethan knelt proper. Ring simple tungsten, etched with anchor and line. Build with me? He asked, blue eyes clear as fjords. Malcolm's yes was a blueprint etched eternal. Their kiss sealing not just vows, but the truth. Love's true measure wasn't perfection, but persistence. The daring to double-book hearts and share the cabin forever. In the end, they stood not broken, but whole. Architects of a life where betrayals forged, crises clarified, and healing hummed like a ship's steady thrum. Human, vast, enduring.